big Saturday coming up at Santa Anita. Also a big day coming up at Gulfstream Park. There's big races this weekend at Aqueduct with the Gotham. And what's nice is on these bigger days, they'll put the races out and they'll draw the entries a few days early. That just helps all of us handicappers and all of us content creators so we can get our handicapping done a little bit earlier and we can start promoting these races. So we're recording this on Tuesday early in the week, and we've already finished handicapping a lot of the Santa Anita Saturday card. I'm very lucky to have a good friend who's joined us on That's What G Said podcast many times. She's one of the absolute sharpest handicappers you will find. Does a fantastic job working with optics and with all of the different places that she has done content for, different racetracks that she works with. Our good friend Emily Gullickson. Emily, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, and yeah, good segue because I'll plug Hawthorne here as well because I'm working with Hawthorne, and Hawthorne opening day is on Sunday, March 5th.
Awesome. Yeah, I saw you pointing that out too. So right now, as you and I talk on, the end of February leading into March, what tracks are you looking at consistently right now?
Right now, Oaklawn, Southern California, Hawthorne, Fairgrounds.
Okay, so
but I mean, I'm kind of all over the place too because I do the Hawthorne live show, which does Aqueduct, Gulfstream, and Tampa. The early races on Friday, so I'm still all over. But as far as notes, those 4 tracks, and then full card analysis for Hawthorne and Oaklawn.
So any fans of Emily's out there, you can get her analysis and some of her thoughts on all these different races if you ever need a little bit of help. And we could use a little bit of help because one of the benefits of some days being canceled and because of wet weather, we have some really big fields at Santa Anita this week. There's some good races, in particular the 4 stakes races that you and I are going to discuss, and even the rest of the card. I was starting to peek at some of the other races that you and I won't be hitting on. Really strong card, and that's what happens when you have a couple days canceled because of the rain. They haven't run in Southern California for what's going to have been 2 weeks.
Right, or you just have a big horse population, whichever way you want to look at it. But yeah, big full fields, competitive races will always take that. And then the quality races, the stakes, just get a lot of attention because they are what they are.
So for those of you who are following along, me and Emily are going to discuss races 5, 6, and 11, and 12. They're 4 graded stakes races on the Saturday card. They're all really, really fun, contentious races, and we can dive right in, starting with race number 5, the Buena Vista. So this race, Emily, we're going to go a mile on the turf, and as is the case with a lot of these races that are, kind of series and prep races, we'll see a lot of familiar faces. Like you have the one closing remarks and Quattrell. They both come out of the same race along with School Dance and even Nadette. All 4 of them exit the megahertz most recently, a race that was won by Quattrell. And what kind of happens in a lot of these turf sort of distance races, it kind of becomes like a your turn, my turn with these rivals. It becomes who gets the better of the trip that day. Well, Quattrell was always sort of knocking on the door, and she finally put it all together. She actually ran right by closing remarks down towards the inside in that race. Who are some of the horses that are on your radar to start in here in the Buena Vista?
Well, there's really only one horse on my radar in this race, but I mean, I can start by commenting on those 2. I mean, as far as closing remarks, she's been around for a while. She started racing it too, and she is who she is. So running down closing remarks is fine. She's a fine horse, but this is graded stakes caliber. She really hasn't shown she's quite on that level. She can pick up a minor share. So as far as Quattrell, I mean, she ran well. She got a good ground-saving trip. She got a great ride under Barrios. Closed ground was at a time when the Mullins barn was hot. Got a great price on her that day. So that kind of seemed like the time. But you mentioned Nadette, and that's the one horse for me in this race. And really, the rest of the field, it's sort of like I can really say the same thing about them is they just haven't been on the graded stakes level, or they're stepping up to the graded stakes level. And as far as Nadette, this goes back to the Autumn Miss last October, where she ran a better than look race. She broke slow, closed a ton of ground. And I thought as far as the megahertz, that race just kind of looked like a prep for her, where she was inside, she was up close early, where it was that's not her running style. So it looked like the type of race that we're going to get some fitness out of her. And you might get some added value because people will see that Rispoli is sticking with TikTok famous, and maybe people are thinking like TikTok famous is the up and comer, but Nadette's going to pick up this jockey called Frankie Dettori, and I think
Yeah.
he's okay. I
He's
think
not
he's all
bad.
right. So
Yeah.
I don't really mind that change, and I just think this is such the right horse. I mean, you talk class. She's a class of the field. She has that fitness on her side. She even has the stakes experience on her side. Again, keying off that autumn miss. So for me in this race, if I don't take her, it's anybody else in this group. So that's where I land.
I sort of had a similar kind of assessment of the race with you. I liked Nadette quite a bit off of that race last time out, and off of her U.S. debut. Yeah, like I said, I was a little disappointed she got bet, but when you look back at the race, you're right. It just seemed like a race that they were sort of trying to get one in, and I'm expecting a better effort from her here. But I'm not. Quattrell and closing remarks coming out of that race, I'm really not sold on either one of them. And as we start eliminating runners, I kind of felt like School Dance is maybe a horse. Now, she won at a mile. I think she's a little bit better going a little longer where she can sit kind of a softer upfront trip, which she did. We saw kind of in the American Oaks when she was right behind Rhea Moon, and she did when she won going a mile and an eighth. And I started just eliminating horses. The one that I guess, like minorly intrigued by would be the 4 Kitty Katana. I think she's kind of just getting a little bit better as she's improving, and she might be able to sit a trip. How do you see the pace unfolding in this particular race? Is it going to be fast? Do you see, because it doesn't really seem like there are any. I mean, we have Anna Galassa and then kind of everyone else sort of picking their spots behind.
Yeah, it's gonna really be a rider's race. I mean, the optics plot fit, it's a red plot fit, so it's not the reliability isn't quite there as far as the horses getting trips. And that comes with
Mm-hmm.
a fire contention, but I take that with a grain of salt because there's really not many front running types. The 7, obviously, the 2 can show early speed, and then some others in this field can be on or near the lead if needed. So I think it's going to come down to how the riders are going to ride, how the horses are informed, what kind of trip they get. But I think it's hard at this point in this when we're looking at these races to really determine that, right? Because you
Mm-hmm.
you could draw it up 15, 20 different ways, and as of right now, none of those scenarios would be wrong, right?
Yep.
And then when they run the race, you could be like, oh, it's the 21st way that I didn't quite see that how they're going to play, how they're going to play out. I mean, Kitty Katana has the benefit of Pratt, who's been aboard in the past and has had success aboard her. She's been very consistent. She's been on the board in all of her starts. She's even run well in graded stakes company. She finished a decent race in the Sweet Life. She had some trouble that day where she had to move and was wide. And then she ran in the Autumn Mist, which is that common race with Nadette. And I preferred the race from Nadette that day. I thought Kitty Katana
I
was
agree.
fine. She was coming off a little bit of a freshening, but just her overall visuals, distance-wise, she's probably fine for a mile. But it needs that kind of top effort, and trip.
Trip,
So,
yeah.
again, it's like I could really see like kind of any of these horses. That's why it's sort of a spot where I'm like, I'm going to just kind of make a decision,
Yeah.
probably get a price,
Yeah, because I agree with you. She was one that she had that really brutal trip, like her first time in the US. And she's one that like we've probably kept an eye on for quite some time because she's always run well, but she's shown like some gradual improvement lately. I still feel like she might be a little better than she is, but I think for her, can she get like that? Can she sit third, get like a really nice, no trouble, no traffic trip, like get the jump on everyone? And that's probably how she wins this race if she were. But the one that's the most intriguing as we start eliminating horses too, it's just really got to be Nadette. She got bet last time, and I think she's going to give us value because she was a little disappointing last time out, but we know there's a better race in there, and the intention may have been with someone like Drysdale, just like you said, to get that race under her, get the fitness level now. She'll really be making her third start in the US. She's a must use for me in exotics, in any type of rolling exotics. And you've kind of keyed in on her as your horse to play in here.
Yeah, I mean, because then it does come down to playing the race, and when you had the past performances up for Kitty Katana, it really jumps out that how many times she's been favored.
Yeah.
So it just tends to be a horse that's popular. Now she can also kind of sneak away a little bit. But as far as being favored, do you think she will be in this race? I mean, like I said, it's kind of tricky.
I think the 5 is probably going to get a good amount of money too. School Dance. That horse was favored in the megahertz last time out. And I wouldn't be shocked because like the D'Amatos will take a good amount of support. I think most likely. Anna Galassa probably will be like the speedy kind of long shot of the D'Amatos. I think so. Probably will get the least support of them. Quattrell doesn't usually get bet. She'll probably be in that like next tier right after the shorter prices. That'll probably be School Dance, maybe Kitty Katana. And we started to talk a little bit about Macadamia. Do you give her any sort of chances? She's kind of a new face. She's another D'Amato in here that puts a couple starts together.
Yeah, I mean, she was just kind of one of those that sort of expected a little bit more from her right from the start. She didn't have trouble in her first start in the U.S., though it might appear like she did. It really wasn't anything that impacted her, and sort of the same thing in her second start, the other N2 allowance, where she was going 11 furlongs at Del Mar. And just as far as class, now she was able to win last out, but really got a setup that day. With the ride, benefit from the smart handling, and then the rest of the riders in the field didn't show up with their best. So she's not one that she had been running in those a group or graded stakes races, in South America. But as far as her form, maybe she is one that's just kind of putting it together, but one that would need some price compensation because does have her hurdles as well.
Yeah, and that's a really great point. They took when you watch the race, she looked like a winner really all the way around, just the way the race was shaping up. She took back nicely, and there was a bunch of traffic in front of her, and she was able to just kind of tip to the outside, wait patiently, and she just kind of blew by and geared down late. So it was very much like the setup for her in that race. And sometimes when horses get such a great trip, it's not that they can't, again, Emily, but we're usually playing them off of the great trip that they got in their last race, right? You're usually like spotting some of that value.
Yeah. And, I think that's something that it goes one step further when you're watching, races. I think a lot of us kind of get keyed into, looking for trouble or, looking for those types of things and not necessarily like why horses run good races or bad races. I know this is something I've said before. And I've heard like, Matthias talk about that in the past, who watch a lot of races as well. And that's really the key of like, why these horses are running good races and bad races. Was it circumstance? Was it class? Was it, they're in the right part of their form cycle, etc. So, we'll see. She maybe again, that was just kind of the confidence she needs. They're obviously running here and taking a shot. So, we shall see.
We will move along from race number 5 to race number 6. And the 6th race on Saturday is the Grade 2 San Felipe with Kentucky Derby points on the line. Now, the talking point for this race is that we've had a lot of the Bob Baffert runners move into different barns. They needed to move into different barns if they were going to pick up Kentucky Derby points and try to qualify themselves to run in the Kentucky Derby. So in this particular race, we have 5 horses that are trained by Tim Yaktine. 4 of them were formerly trained Baffert horses that are moving into the Yaktine barn. We saw Baffert send some of his runners to Yaktine. They know each other very well, was a former assistant, and was so there's a lot of familiarity with them. So, I mean, do you take that? Does that weigh anything at all into your handicapping that we've seen these horses in the care of Baffert now move into the Yaktine barn within just a few weeks, or do you like treat that anything differently?
I think a lot of times it's sort of overthinking it. I mean, we saw Reincarnate last weekend in the Rebel, who I thought ran a good race. Actually,
had some trouble.
I thought he was going to run.
Me too.
A good effort in there, but this is such a recent barn. And then there was another horse that didn't run well, who was at the fairgrounds as well, that had moved to Asmussen kind of ahead of time. I forget the horse, but I know it was a 5. Yeah. And it's the barn change being so recent that I would look at these horses as what they're telling you right now, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's like that saying, like when people tell you who they are, believe them. And like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't hang out with a lot of people. So with the horses, where the horses kind of tell me who they are, and I tend to believe them. So at this point in time, I don't really see these horses that are making this barn change necessarily like moving up or moving down. Just looking at sort of assessing their current form based on what they've done on the track and how they fit today's race. That's sort of how I'm assessing it until they tell me otherwise.
And it sounds like you do what I do sometimes too. Like I will call people horses sometimes when I'm interacting with them. I'll say something like,
well, I don't interact with people, so
yeah, I'll say something like, oh yeah, that horse went there. I was like, oh wait, no, that was a person that did that. It wasn't that horse that made that move, or like when, especially when you're like driving.
I think I do it more like when I'm driving. I'm
yep,
like,
exactly.
Get off the rail.
When I'm driving, right? I'm like, oh man, get over 2 paths. Come on. Yeah. So this one though, it's a really deep group here, and it's not as if there seems like on paper there's necessarily one absolute standout from the Baffert barn that just moved on over. There aren't any of these that are like the real super proven horses either. It's pretty contentious. I mean, we have Hijazi, National Treasure, and and of the Baffert horses, yeah, like those were the Baffert, Fort Bragg, and Mr. Fix. Those are the ones, but Hijazi, National Treasure, probably the most fancied and the most well-known. Hijazi was the $3.5 million purchase, who he's never really run a bad race. His debut, he was heavily favored and he was a runner-up, and he's kind of figured it out. He was in against Graded Stakes Company. He was behind Cave Rock and National Treasure. He'll take a lot of money. National Treasure will take support. You have Go Rocket Ride, who for Richard Mandela was very fast. Sprinter, earned a nice figure in winning first time out. Skinner has kind of put it all together. He got a really nice win after showing some ability early on in his career. Talk to us about the San Felipe and who are some of the major horses on your radar here.
Well, do you want to talk about it like?
Yeah.
Do you want to start by assessing those Baffert horses?
Or, let's go that way. Let's go for the Baffert horses. So we can kind of start inside out, going through the field with National Treasure, the number 2, probably, like the most accomplished as far as what he's done overall in stakes company. He's never really run a bad race. He's, second in the American Pharoah behind Cave Rock, third in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile behind Forte and Cave Rock, and he ran behind Reincarnate and Newgate. And that race looks a little bit better now after a couple weeks, because Newgate came back to win, and Reincarnate came back and was a troubled third in the Rebel. Where do you stand with National Treasure making his second start back since the Breeders' Cup Juvenile?
Yeah, I mean, you could say he's the class of the field. I mean, based on the horses that he's run against, right? I mean, he's run in a couple graded stakes races, ran behind Fort, who's going to run this weekend, the Fountain of Youth, and then, as you mentioned, the Sham, which was such a tough race to assess, because those 3 Baffert horses ran 1, 2, 3, and there was 2 other horses in the race. One was a turf horse, one pulled up. So as far as National Treasure, he is, I think you said, like the most accomplished and consistent as far as speed figures, been able to take his race around 2 turns. He just hasn't really like quite impressed. And I think people like wanted to get there. I know people really wanted to get there, like in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. And maybe just that foundation carries him in this race where he's drawn inside. He has some tactical speed. He has the ability to pass and finish horses. He's kind of like, he's a quadrant 1 square, but he's kind of like towing the quadrant 2 line. So it's like, he's a horse that definitely doesn't need the lead, but that tactical speed, puts him in the race, and he should be able to finish from there. So it's a horse that's, it's tough to knock. He should be a little bit longer odds than he was last out. And so that's probably something that upgrades this horse. I think that's probably sort of the way I'm going to look at this race, is more from that standpoint, because there are so many ways to go in here.
He does just look more bettable here, most likely. Like he kind of reminds me a little bit, just looking at his lines, a little bit like Medina Spirit when you saw him. Like, he's just not really flashy. But he's just kind of always there, kind of hard knocking behind some of the horses that are like more fancy than him, or maybe a little bit sexier on paper. But, I don't really have any knocks on him. Like, I'm not trying to beat him in this race, and he probably will present us a little bit better value. While we're talking about these Baffert now into Yakteen barn horses, let's talk about Hijazi, who was always the really highly fancied horse. He's been favored in 3 of his 4. The only race he wasn't favored was when he was in a grade 1 against other Bob Baffert runners, and he still was only, 3-1 that day. He finally put it all together in his last start. He basically was just sent from the inside in a sprint race. He drew the rail and they just sort of pushed him along from the inside. And so we know he's really quick, as well as a horse who has a ton of upside and they thought super highly of. What are we doing with Hijazi?
Well, going back to the debut, my note on this horse was, he used a step slow and then he rated off the pace setters. But just from a visual standpoint, he looks like a horse that wants to be on the lead. So the fact that it's like, it took him like 3-4 starts to get there, and then it's like, oh, you let him finally do what he wants to do. So yeah. I think that has to be the plan. I think that's what this horse wants to do. If they put him on the lead, he's run the fastest races in this field and could just be the fastest horse. And I think that's going to be the strategy here. We're going to find out, where he's going to stack up just as far as like getting that win. Because as you mentioned, he has come up short at those shorter prices. But again, I think it was Tripp. It was the way he was handled in those races. And going to the lead today, that's what he wants to do. And we'll just see if he's good enough.
You can tell when he was running, when he just sort of looms up, like, I don't know if he wants to really start and stop, like when they grab a hold and then ask again. I think he's just best, like you said, freewheeling, get aggressive with him. Those bigger horses like that too, when you try to, like, if they get into trouble or you have to try to ask them multiple times, it usually doesn't work out as well. You're best off keeping them sort of in the clear or right on the front end. And you know what? I will give Mike Smith isn't always someone that we think of as a jockey that is like that, right? But he has been that way a little bit more recently with a couple of the horses on the card that we're going to talk about with Hijazi. And he did the same thing with Stiletto Boy coming out of the Pegasus race, where he just said, hey, you know what? My best chances in this race are to just ride this horse really hard, aggressively early on and make sure he gets the lead, even if I have to go a little bit faster early, keep him out of trouble. And yeah, that feels like the plan for Hijazi. But he'll probably have some company right next door with Go Rocket Ride, who we can get back to in a minute. Let's just keep talking to the other 2 Bafferts right now while we can. We have Fort Bragg and Skinner. Fort Bragg comes out of the Los Al Futurity last time out. He was behind Practical Move. He did have some trouble at the start. And then the final of the Bafferts is Mr. Fisk. He sort of, interestingly, when you look at his like template, he didn't get any action at all in his first 2 starts, which is so rare for a Baffert horse to be like 10-1 and 18-1 in his first 2. But then he came back in his 3rd start and he broke his maiden. Just kind of seemed like a horse who wasn't really one that wanted to go short.
Yeah, I mean, he's also, if we're talking Mr. Fisk, he's also a horse that's just not very fast. So I just don't know. Yeah, I mean, this horse just might not be very good. At all. I mean, again, like I said, we only have the horses to go off of, and based on what he's run to date, he's so much below the other runners in this field that you're going to have to project like 10, 15 point improvement for a horse that really hasn't shown much in terms of improvement in his races to date. So where that improvement's going to come from, where that trip is going to come from, because
when
he did get
tough
a
post in a big field against the best competition he's faced too.
Yeah,
right?
he looks pretty much below, but I think he's on the grounds. It's a homebred. Take a shot. Find out. If he wins, he should be. Let me look real quick. Probably the longest shot in this field.
Yeah, I think he should be.
His numbers are even below Chase the Chaos. So
maybe Crypto. I mean, the Calbred Crypto Ride will probably not.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
But like that. No, but you're right.
Yeah, he'll be the second longest.
Yeah. We have. Yeah, he will be definitely of like the more fancied of the the former Baffert runners. I couldn't get quite to him. Positives, negatives on Fort Bragg, who actually does lure Hernandez.
Yeah, I mean, Fort Bragg, going back to his debut, looked like a horse that would benefit from added ground. Now, while he has actually moved forward in each of those three starts, and it is a gradual progression, could still present a move forward again today. But again, another one that's been a little bit soft. As far as the Los Al Futurity, it was another race that was a more compact field. Arabian Lion was in that race and he was a big favorite. And Arabian Lion going into that race looked like he should have been a complete standout. And that horse has just gone completely the other direction
Yep.
since. So he's going to get a class test today. A practical move comes out of that race, which again, if you consider that being kind of a 4-horse field, another one that's going to
And
get
he
a
got
class test.
he got a really nice rail run through too. Like things kind of went really perfect for him that day in that particular race when one of the major players doesn't fire, he gets a nice rail run through and wins. It was I
Yeah.
sort of want to make him prove it to me again
Yeah.
in a spot like this.
Yeah, but the distance is finally what he wants to do, and having that foundation, and one of those horses that maybe if he gets lost on the board is
Yep.
one that you can start to just kind of upgrade, just kind of based on the price.
So following those Baffert runners, let's talk about another horse who win, lose, like the horse or not, will probably have an impact on this race. That's the number 8, Go Rocket Ride. He's making his second career start in his debut. He was 6-1. He showed speed from the inside. He drew post 2 that day. He got the lead over the 1-2 favorite who was pressing him throughout. And he puts that horse away. That horse was a runner-up, came back to win their next start very easily. Go Rocket Ride, Pratt aboard for Mandela. How good is this horse? Can he stretch out from 6 to a mile and a 16th? Is he fast as a horse like Hijazi right next door? How do you feel about Go Rocket Ride?
He's just another horse that he has a lot to prove.
Yeah.
And could get a lot of attention because I think that running line and figure makes him look very flashy. The rest of the horses in that field are extremely slow. Even Sonoran, who came back, which is another Baffert horse. It's a Baffert homebred. And while Sonoran did win, and he won by 7 lengths in his next start, he ran on optics figures in 86. Yeah, that's even an 81. Yeah. So it's like an 81 isn't gonna
compete in this race. No.
Yeah, and then being kind of the best of speed and being inside and not really facing much on debut. This is just such a big class test, and again, it's kind of the type of horse that he might be an underlay in here, and maybe he's the goods. Honestly, maybe he is the goods, but
it's a lot to ask.
It is a lot to ask. He's going to have to step up. He's facing tougher competition for the first time. He's stretching out in distance for the first time. If they use the same tactic, they're going to be, as you mentioned, running into Hijazi, maybe some others in here that are going to end up sending. I guess Bluegrass Go-Go is going to probably be one of those other longer shots in this group. But,
yep.
There's a lot to prove on that horse that you just, for me at least, I guess I'm not going to really tell people what they can do, but for me, the type of horse that I would require price compensation to play.
Absolutely.
It kind of feels like maybe it won't be there because of the connections and because of the way that running line and figure just kind of jump out.
Yeah. Go Rocket Ride. It looks like when they're working in the morning too, as what they try to do, they're trying to work him with a target and get him to relax a little bit. But then sometimes that will sort of hinder what your best weapon is, your speed. Sometimes we can get a little bit too cute especially when you're trying to get horses quickly ready for something like this. When you want them to progress for this race and have them ready for the Santa Anita Derby and then the Kentucky Derby. So I'll be interested to see, like, are they going to try to get caught up with Hijazi? Just in seeing like some of the recent works, I'm wondering, but yeah,
well, I mean, if you let's play out that scenario,
right?
Let's say they try to rate. I mean, is Hijazi just like home and hosed at that point? Because
right? If he's only dealing with like the maiden Bluegrass Go-Go who's trying to put a little like token speed on him and he has no class whatsoever, right?
He's not fast enough.
I mean, the more we talk this race out, especially if Go Rocket Ride does, this could be a Hijazi on the front end trip. And that's what ends up getting a little bit difficult about these races with the multiple Bafferts with speed. Like Fort Bragg probably wants to be pretty close, but are they going to all want to press each other again in this race? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, because we could have 3 speed horses right next door to each other too, with the Jazzy Go Rocket Ride and Fort Bragg all with an alert beginning. They could be sort of dictating things out there. One more I want to mention, and then we can get to anybody else in the field that's on your radar too. Skinner. Skinner was a horse who I played in the American Pharoah in his 3rd start, because coming off of his debut, didn't really fire, had some trouble, but he was behind these just faster horses in smaller fields like Havner, Meltdown, and Cave Rock. So he doesn't have that kind of early speed. He's always going to be behind horses like that in those types of races. I thought the American Pharoah was a race where he would maybe get a little bit of pace to run at. He just, again, didn't fire that day at all. He was off for a few months, but he showed back up in his first start at 3, and he was very impressive. He won nicely. He came from way off the pace in a race that did set up very well for him, but he took a big step forward on speed figures and everything. And he looked like he grew up and matured a little bit. He's bred very nicely. They paid $510,000 for him, so it's no surprise here. And we know that John Sheriffs can get horses ready for some of these bigger races. Do you think Skinner has a shot in here?
I think Skinner's a very good horse. I mean, his debut was sneaky good. That 5th place finish back at Del Mar in July. That was a very good effort. He was wide. He closed ground. He galloped out. Even his Del Mar Futurity. I mean, even just from Sheriffs to run in a graded stakes race. Now, this summer at Del Mar, CRK really had like a strong meet, so I think they were pretty confident, pretty aggressive pointing their horses, but ran very well in the Del Mar Futurity. That's one to go back and watch if people don't have that one kind of fresh in their mind, because he made a couple moves in there. Both the Baffert runners finished 1-2. It was like an open length winner. And then as far as the American Pharoah, it looks like he had like a bar shoe on that day, and the ride was just not. It wasn't a good ride. There was just no confidence. They were unable to establish early position. He was caught wide. He was wearing cheek pieces that day. So that race does bother me, but at the same time, it seems like there was kind of enough going on in there, and especially with the layoff that followed, to be a little bit forgiving, especially coming back and running the race that he did. We kind of thought he knew he was capable of running, right? And so if he's able to pair up those races, now he is going to have to come back in 20 days. He's going to be, back in against graded stakes company. He's going to have to step up. But I do think there is still something there. I'm not counting him as a one-off, because he did run so well and showed run at times that I think he's a very good horse.
Yeah, me too. I'm any type of exotics that I'm playing. He's going to be in the mix for me too. You just see versions of this race where they go a little fat. Like we've talked about how, Hijazi maybe can sneak away, or maybe one or two of these speed horses in, but then you got to play it out in your head, right? There are simulations of this race where Hijazi, Go Rocket Ride, Fort Bragg all show a little bit of speed. We get one or two of these others in this bigger field that just want to be forwardly placed, keep themselves out of trouble. And then all of a sudden, now this pace is cooking pretty good.
Yeah. And I guess maybe the one horse we kind of touched on him a little bit, but just kind of going back through is Practical Move, who is the kind of Yak Teen runner. I think you mentioned it just as far as kind of getting that perfect trip last out. So coming off the slight freshening, this will be the class test for him, and still distance test, really.
Yeah. We got through most of this field. The only ones we didn't talk a whole lot about, Chase the Chaos, was up at Golden Gate. He won the El Camino Real Derby. He's only been on the dirt one time, and it wasn't even dirt. It was a wet track over at Canterbury in his career debut. So they're just, you take a swing here with a horse like this who, won the prep up in Northern California. It doesn't really hurt you any to come down here and sort of see where he stacks up. And if he runs well here, then maybe you can go and one of the synthetic, maybe you go over to Turfway and take a shot over there on the synthetic, because he likes it. Would you give this horse at all a chance against this, classier competition?
This is a much tougher spot. I don't think it's even as much as the surface. I mean, he'd obviously just have to improve on the dirt, which is unknown. But he's a good horse. Like, he's a good horse in his own right. I mean, he really has kind of improved race to race. Got a great ride in the El Camino Real, but he still ran. He still showed up and ran his race. So as an individual, I can't knock him. I just think this is a tough spot. but there should be plenty of price compensation on him.
Absolutely. And then we pretty much talked about the whole field. The only one we didn't was Genius Jimmy. We mentioned Bluegrass Go-Go, who's a maiden, taking the blinkers off. They should probably just try to get him forwardly placed in here, but he just looks overmatched. And then Genius Jimmy was a turf winner going 1 mile and an eighth. They got aggressive with him last time out from the outside, and now they'll try the dirt with him, and another horse where you're just sort of taking a swing to see what you got.
Yeah, and why not, right? I mean, they kind of took a swing with the trip last out, and it worked out. And if he's in form right now and tends to run every couple of weeks, put him in here, see what happens. And if not, you still have your N1 condition, and
go right back to the turf.
Go from there.
Yeah, you go right back to the grass. So that's a look at the San Felipe, a very intriguing field, just even from like a handicapping, talking it out standpoint, as we have a lot of horses that look like they have talent and some real upside, but they're not quite all that proven yet with their biggest of races. Like, we haven't seen that National Treasure, maybe big race, or even the Hijazi big one against big competition. Maybe they have one in it. Maybe it's someone else. That is the San Felipe, one of a couple prep races. There's 3 this weekend with the San Felipe, the Fountain of Youth, and also the Gotham. So a lot of Kentucky Derby points on the line this weekend. Emily, let's move to the final 2 races on the card. We have a couple more fun graded stakes races to discuss. First up, it's race number 11. It's the Kilroe. They will go 1 mile on the turf in here. And you have Hong Kong Harry, who will likely be the headliner in this one. Hong Kong Harry has won 5 of his 6 starts in the U.S. His only defeat came when he finished second in the Eddie Reed. He has won 3 graded stakes races during that stretch, and he's defeated a couple of the common rivals, horses like Master of Foxhounds, Irideo. In that race on November the 26th, he also beat horses like Santin and Smooth Like Straight, who are pretty nice runners. We have Gold Phoenix, who last showed up in the Breeders' Cup, but he was very consistent prior to that. Master of Foxhound seems like he's always in these graded stakes races. You have, De Jour, who showed up off of a long layoff and was very impressive last time out. And then Royal Ship, who was a graded stakes winner, multiple graded stakes winner on the dirt. He's actually been a horse who had some good success on the turf in Brazil, not as much in the U.S. since he's come. He's been more of a dirt horse here, but he certainly has some grass credentials. Again, lots of ways to go. Air Force Red tried to sit a little last time out. I think they may get more aggressive with him again. He's probably a little better when he's kind of freewheeling it on the front end. Talk to us about the 11th race. It's the Kilroe Mile. Who are some of the horses you would start with here?
Yeah, I mean, this I think, starting from the standpoint that technically this is a grade 1 race, right? You have a lot of horses that have been running in like the grade 2, grade 3 company. We talk about, kind of West Coast turf, maybe not as strong as anything that goes east, and certainly not overseas. And so for most of this field, they are kind of that horse, right? Where they're proven in the grade 2 level, but haven't quite done what is needed to have been done in the maybe few times that some of these runners have run in the race. So can be a little bit softer race part, which can create some chaos in here. A lot of D'Amato runners in this field could turn into a rider's race, and kind of what horse is in form. As far as the kind of pace scenario of this race, as you mentioned, Air Force Red, not a D'Amato horse, but could be forwardly placed. Master of Foxhounds, also likely to be a little bit more forwardly placed, and probably a little bit better going shorter. I know they've tried to keep this horse longer. I'm not quite sure if he's a miler, but I think he's better when he's on or near the lead. And then, Hong Kong Harry, he's kind of one of those horses that's like, he's so tough for me because he's like favorable trip Freddy, but then then he just keeps
he just keeps getting him and blowing by. Yeah.
And that's like, I want to just keep beating him because he has these favorable trips, and then he just keeps working out another one after another one after another one. So at some point you have to just give him credit for that. You mentioned Du Jour, which last time for me, I mean, I did this sequence. That sequence was a late pick 5 with David Aragona. We had some really great ideas, with Du Jour being one of them. And we handicapped the race before the morning line came out. And both David and I thought this horse was like a real logical type horse. Like we didn't think we were like, uh, really
50.
stepping outside, right? I thought he was like 5-2, 3-1, somewhere in there because he was just so logical. And the morning line came out, he's 15-1. And it was like just pretty crazy that he stayed that way, but ran a huge race. But this is a tougher spot. Now he's going to have to come back where he's probably prepped for that big effort that day. And this is a tougher spot where he's going to have to get faster and he's going to be a shorter price. Now, you mentioned Royal Ship. Now, as far as grade one, he's run in grade one company and he's run very strong races in grade two company. Now, as far as the turf, I think people are going to kind of steer away or maybe not quite look at him as a turf horse. But that might be a little bit of a mistake because going back to 2020 when he ran the Del Mar Mile, he ran a huge race that day. I know it's a third place finish, might not look like much on paper. That was a winning type effort. You can watch the visuals. And then same thing, ran a good race in the City of Hope Mile, didn't get a good ride that day, was kind of buried down inside. And then as far as the Frank Kilroe Mile, grade one back in 2021, that was a better than looked effort. That was a huge race for him where he had traffic and trouble and he closed. So this is a horse that actually is proven in grade one company and on the turf. But he's also proven grade one, stakes horse on the dirt. I think there's a lot of quality there. He's coming off the layoff, so there are the challenges, but there should be price compensation. So that's a horse that I'm definitely using in here. Outside of that, it really becomes kind of a spread and kind of looking for prices, not taking too short of prices on some of these horses, and then maybe upgrading just as far as race shape, right? But for sure Royal Ship is a horse that I'm using in this race.
As far as the way the race shapes up, it probably goes through Air Force Red on the front end. They had him sit off the pace a little bit. It was sort of a weird race because on paper Air Force Red looked like he was probably the fastest last time out. There was a horse that drew way to the outside and they got aggressive with that horse. So I wasn't expecting him to be on the lead. And Air Force Red sat fine just off the pace. I mean, turning for home, he looked like he was going to win, but he just didn't quicken in getting a perfect trip. And when I see that a lot of times and watched a couple of his races where he sat off, he just doesn't run the same sitting off like he does when he's right on the lead. I would imagine they probably try to get aggressive with him again and put him right back on the front end because I think that's where he's best. Do you assume the same with Air Force Red?
Yeah, and but again, I mean, you could also make the case that it's class as well, right?
Absolutely, because that race was softer than this race.
Yeah. Those were all softer spots. So I think that they're best, and knowing that as well is kind of the key. Is the fact that hey, grade stakes company has been a hurdle for us. We've got to go to the front. Like
let's use our advantage, right? We don't want to sit
use our
here.
Advantage. If we're not good enough, so be it, But we
don't want to sit and kind of try to close with the closers, you know, because we're not going to do that. And that's what ended up happening with Air Force Red. He tried to sit and close, and he kept a lot of the other horses in the race there. Now, horse like Gold Phoenix, we haven't seen since the Breeders' Cup. He was just overmatched. A lot of these, as you mentioned, like a lot of the West Coast turf horses are just overmatched come Breeders' Cup time. But when he was with his West Coast friends, he was pretty competitive in a lot of those races. He was right there with Master of Foxhounds in the John Henry. He won the Del Mar handicap. I mean, he's never run a bad race. He's kind of a quirky horse, though, and it was sort of tough to ride. We saw in a couple of his first starts when he was sprinting. I think he settled down and matured a little bit last year. Do you give him a look in here at all? Would he be a horse that you sneak into any of your exotics?
In exotics, I mean, that could be anything. I mean, I just think as far as he's been running longer, miles are typically, you need some kind of brilliance. And I know he has won at a mile, but it's a lot different when it's a non-winners one allowance optional claiming race.
It's just class there.
Stakes races, and just the fact that they have kind of kept him longer. That's usually for a reason, and it's often because the mile is such a distance that requires, that class and kind of brilliance and all of that. And I'm not sure where Gold Phoenix has that, despite, as you mentioned, he has races that are certainly competitive. Just are they at today's distance, and are they going to come first off this layoff? I'm not sure. Yeah,
I'm kind of
but
watching. Yeah, I'm just watching. I agree with you. It seems like this could be just like a nice starting point for his year too. And I'm not saying that, oh yeah, they're using a grade one here to just prep with zero intention of winning this race. But if you know this is a horse who's probably a little bit better going long, you get him in this race, there would be they wouldn't have a problem winning or running well in here. But I'll play him if he runs well here going longer next time and later in the year. I think that's probably where he's a little bit better suited. I agreed with you. Yeah, we have a couple other horses like Cabo Spirit and Baliknikov. They're stepping up. And they're facing older. Cabo Spirit did last time for the first time. He had post 12. He just had to take way back and then go way wide. Baliknikov will face older for the first time. We didn't hit on Irideo. Is there anything else or any of those that you have any positive endorsements for?
I thought Kelva Spirit's race last out in the Thunder Road was like really sneaky good. That was
It
a better than
was.
looked at
Yeah,
bird,
it was.
in my opinion. I still don't know if he's quite good enough, because this is another step up in class and he's been a little bit overmatched. But he gets a little credit for that, and he's probably in the right spot, as you mentioned. Valenikoff, another horse that's has some quality to him, could be on the improve. Again, it's making his first start as a 4-year-old, a developing type, because he did improve last year. The last part of the season, he really started to step up, started to get faster, had some issues finishing second, where he was restless in the gate and he was kind of stuck behind horses on hold. December 26th. I guess it's not really last year. It's the first
Yeah,
day of
right.
the meet.
Yeah.
But had some trip issues that day, and picks up Rispoli, who's been aboard in the past and was aboard when he won the Oceanside. So there could be some confidence there on kind of a lightly raced, developing type horse. As far as Irideo, he's just another one of those horses that I think it's kind of one of those horses that we'll use for underneath, and maybe that's the way to go, because he has been a little bit below just on the win end, but he does show up with run every
He
time.
does.
You can't discount that.
He's not far behind
No.
this group. And I had on that February 4th day, that was the day that caused me as a gambler to take a little break, because I was alive in a lot of those exotics that you're talking about with Du Jour, Air Force Red, and Irideo closing. I had no Earl's Rock in the pick 6 and pick 5. So I had some exotics that were going to pay me close to like around 20 grand ending, and I had no Earl's Rock, who snuck through in between horses, and I had the 2, 3, 4 runners, and that was. I took a week off after that one. I didn't look at any races for the next week. That was the first time in about 4 years where I haven't looked at a race for a whole week. I told a couple of the places I work with, I said, I need a few days to not look at a race. I don't want that bad feeling. I got a bad energy right now. So maybe we can flip the energy back around with a couple of these runners. Seeing a lot of them from that February 4th day in handicapping this card. I got some good feels and I got some bad feels all throughout. So Irideo was close at 33-1 behind Du Jour, Air Force Red, but he is at least an under exotics horse, because you said he's not far behind, and he could, if you're playing looking for prices, throw him in.
Yeah. He just shows up. He just runs his race every time. It hasn't quite been good enough, but you're going to get an honest effort.
Let's move to race number 12. It's the big cap, and we'll go 1.25 miles in the Santa Anita handicap, and we'll close out all the exotics with this one. Some of the horses that I think we'll get top billing in here. You'll have Defunded, who was your second choice in the Pegasus World Cup, was just about 3-1. He won the Awesome Again in the Native Diver. Stiletto Boy is sort of a name that we all know because he's been in a lot of these big races for a while. He's right to the inside of Defunded. He's the last couple years, he has not dodged anyone in any of the big races. I think Proxy will also get a good amount of support coming in from the Pegasus World Cup. Ran a kind of a weird race there. Emily was taken back a little bit, and then at the top of the lane, he's just off the screen. He's like distance. He looked like he was just pulled up, and then all of a sudden he like flies back onto the screen again and is coming on late. Very weird there. So I guess as we're talking about him, let's start with Proxy here, because I think he'll be probably one of the major players in this one. He was the Clark winner. He was third in the Stephen F. In the Foster. What do you think about Proxy and his chances in the big cap?
Well, maybe he gets overlooked finishing behind Defunded and Stiletto Boy.
Yeah, if he does, I hope so. Yeah.
And I mean, you mentioned the trip, but in my opinion, going into the race, I actually thought that was the trip that he was going to end up getting. I thought really thought he was disadvantaged with the rail draw and with his running style, because in the Clark, I know he also drew the rail, but it was a more compact field. He was able to angle to the kind of the outside and sit in a perfect trip. And the way that the Pegasus shaped up, it was like, that isn't happening here.
No.
He's going to have to get shuffled way far back. He's going to actually get the run that he had in the Foster. And if you look at those running lines, they're pretty similar because his Foster run looks just the same, where he gets shuffled all the way back. He makes that huge run and he comes on late. Now, the fact that he's drawn outside in here where the pace should be honest, he's going to be able to have a little bit more options because he's not going to get shuffled behind horses and have to take kickback. So I think he moves up in this spot. The post change is a positive for this horse. And as far as the Pegasus World Cup, it kind of seemed like a weaker race. But then Last Samurai came back and won the Razorback and ran a really big race that day in order to win. I think he's the only horse that's come back from that race.
And it's not like they weren't a bunch of like real grade 1 proven horses, but there were a lot of like the resumes for the whole field is a little bit better than people were giving it credit for. When you go sort of horse by horse and their accomplishments, these horses are all pretty proven and they've all had some good days in the last few years. So I agreed with you. While it was like, there was no Life is Good or a Knicks Go on paper. Right. And I think that's what people were a little disappointed in, but overall it was still a contentious betting race. And you had a lot of like strong grade 2 horses.
Yeah. And Proxy's a legitimate graded stakes horse. Like he's proven. It's just, that was just not, he just took I'm not one of those people that like plays post positions blind, like, oh, the rail is, It's like, because everything is situational, and knowing this horse, kind of following the way he runs, watching those trips, and it was like, this is not going to be good for a horse that, is not going to be able to run the race that he's capable of. And he's probably going to get back to run the race he's capable of in here, and he's a fit.
I completely agree. He's major player to me, and I'm glad we started with talking with Proxy. And then let's get to one of the other horses who will, I think he'll be at least a shorter price than Proxy. That's Defunded, who was one of the top choices in the Pegasus World Cup. He was a horse who was... I played him back-to-back in the San Diego and then the Pat O'Brien before he won his 2 races in a row, because those were races on paper that looked sort of good for him too. Like he was going to get a pretty good lone F type trip. Then in the Pat O'Brien, they cut him back. I thought he'd sit a little bit more. And then they just really got aggressive with him in the Awesome Again Pegasus World Cup. He sat second. He was just behind Stiletto Boy, who is drawn to his inside. And they were 1-2 throughout a lot. He really didn't have many excuses. I mean, he had every chance at the top of the lane. He has to prove himself at 1.25 miles. He's never won going that far. He got the trip that he wanted probably last time out. It was a trip, and in particular in that race, Proxy was like the only horse that was passing in there too. Art Collector sat just behind Defunded and Stiletto Boy, and those 3 were the top 3, and nobody else really passed the whole time.
Right. And I mean, if you look at this field, I mean, both those horses, especially if you're saying that the Pegasus World Cup is a race that the form is going to hold up out of, those horses are, kind of proven graded stakes types and have some tactical speed. Both are getting some rider changes in here, which could kind of go either way. I mean, Smith is going to choose to stick with Hopper, or jump on Hopper for the first time, and then Hernandez, obviously, is Maldonado out? Is he
Maldonado's on the 9 now, Scarlet Fusion, I guess.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. So there's kind of some shuffling.
Musical jockeys. Yeah.
Yeah. Some shuffling going on, which is kind of odd or whatever. But, both those horses, they could just be short prices. And I wasn't that crazy about Defunded in the Pegasus World Cup, and I think Tripp carried him. And I thought, as far as Stiletto Boy, I thought he would run the good underneath spot.
Yeah, because you've always said that about him, and you've popped him a few times in situations just like that. He's just a tough horse, right? He doesn't like getting passed. You just kind of have to hard ride him early like that, and he'll keep going for a lot of the time. And he's sort of stubborn, but he just loses to horses that are like a little bit better than him a lot of the time in situations like in tough spots.
Yeah, I mean the Pegasus too. It just kind of seemed like the race that they were pointing to because it was second off. Um, at that time, they had him training at Golden Gate, and he really likes that for whatever reason. I don't know. It's like this weird quirk, but it was just like such the race that I don't know if he's quite like you said, he's probably not good enough to win, but I know the intention is that they're going to Gulfstream Park with a horse that they're gonna try. And
Yep.
sometimes that's all you can ask for, and that's
Yeah.
what this horse gave. He gave a try.
Yep.
Now, is he gonna kind of regress off that? It's possible. And again, he's gonna be a shorter price today, and I think there's some other ideas. So of the horses exiting that race, I'm higher on Proxy.
Yeah, me too. So if we see maybe Stiletto Boy defunded, so you think it's going to be a quick pace in here, with the mile and a quarter, with those two at least in here, with Hopper, probably pushing the pace, and then a couple that aren't really mile and a quarter horses, they may just end up being a little more tracking and kind of pressing in here. I was looking at kind of two intriguing horses that I think will be really nice prices and I think could offer us really nice value, Emily. And so I want to get your thoughts on some of them if we can throw them in exotics. First off, the one there goes Harvard, who comes off of a turf race. He was in the Thunder Road. We talked all about the Thunder Road when we spoke about one of the earlier preps. He was 3 deep. He was hooked wide chasing a fast early pace. He was still in the mix at the top of the lane, and then he faded. That was his first start since July, and it was his first start after a race that had a couple months off. So there were some physical issues for him because he was off for a while. But last year, he strung together some good races on the dirt. And what I liked is he actually showed going a mile and a quarter in the Gold Cup that if he did have a race where he didn't get that perfect trip sitting right there, if he got shuffled back a little bit, if he had to go a little bit, if everything wasn't perfect, he could still overcome that and throw up a big race. I think with an ideal effort, he could get into the mix with this group. Would you give a horse like There Goes Harvard any shot in here?
This horse is extremely live, extremely live. Um, let's go back to that Hollywood Gold Cup. The race before that was, I know he won it, but it was a mile on the turf. It's the exact same pattern. And it's a pattern they've used in the past as far as going turf to dirt and as far as like moving forward with that surface switch. So I think this horse is extremely well met in this race. I think this is the race they were pointing to. I think they got what they needed out of the Thunder Road. Kimura is going to be aboard. He's been riding some live runners for McCarthy. Looks like everything went according to plan, and then some. They came out of the race. They worked a bullet. Since again, I think this horse is extremely live in this spot.
Yeah,
Definite use. Not even just for underneath. Like
even in just like a simple sense, like he beat horses like Defunded and Royal Ship. You know what I mean? Like
no, he's. I mean, like I said,
wow.
he's live in the spot. This horse fits. Like
Yep.
the San Diego, that could be tossed. It was kind of off a layoff. He was also cross-entered in a turf race. Didn't seem like there was intent that day. The intent last out was to prep for something. He shows up here off a similar pattern. His other races are fine as well. So this is definitely a use.
The other, and I liked him more than the other. This horse, I wish I could see one more recent race. But I'm talking about the number 7 Haywood's Beach, who I've no problem, and I don't know again class wise if he's quite as good. I have no problem with him as far as distance is concerned. He showed us he can get the distance. But I think he could get a decent trip if he had a race a little bit more recently, or just maybe a better race than that last one, which was a little disappointing when he was behind Country Grammar. He wasn't that far. I mean, he was behind Stiletto Boy, who was a clear-cut second that day. I feel like there's something there on his best efforts. Haywood's Beach, is he a horse that you could use into exotics or make a case for?
Well, I mean, I think the case for him is that you're just going to be price compensated.
Yeah.
because I think this horse just gets completely lost, and he fits on his best day. Not quite has been at the grade one level in the few grade one races that he's been in. So as far as class, he's a little bit below. He has had some favorable trips at times, but some of those rides have been under Vasquez. And as far as the San Antonio, if you are kind of looking for some excuse, Sadler was still pretty cold at that time. And then noted from a physical standpoint that Haywood's Beach was washed out that day, which for a horse that I have notes on going back to his very first start, I don't have a single note where that horse has ever been warm in any one of his starts.
Good point.
So it could have just been where, it wasn't his day and he just wasn't, wasn't quite ready coming back from Keeneland or whatever. And he's freshened now, so I think there's going to be plenty of price compensation if you can make a case for this horse. I certainly wouldn't talk you off because I think he'll be a big price in here.
Yeah, I just like that there is a 1.25 mile win on the dirt at Santa Anita too, which is nice. Just seeing him like sit the trip where he ran a race that would not be far off of what it would take to beat this group there. Haywood's Beach at a price, a horse that I will throw into at least some exotics there. Let's hit on a few others in this field before we finish up. Emily, we had 3 horses that all came out of the San Pasquale: Newgrange, Hopper, and Parnelli. Top of the lane in that race. Newgrange looked like they were done. I thought Newgrange was done, sort of all in, like scrubbing. I think Juan Hernandez gave a couple taps of the whip, and then turning for home, he sort of just kind of got by Hopper and Parnelli. And for Hopper, we could understand why maybe he got a little bit tired. It was his first start since June, so he noticeably got a bit tired there late in the stages. The 3 horses that come out of the San Pasquale, any positives, negatives, do you like or toss?
I think they're all going to have to step up. I mean, they could, as far as you mentioned, Hopper's probably going to be forwardly placed. Smith maybe chose to go there. It's really hard to know, like what with the shuffling, what goes into what. But I think the plan is to be forwardly placed. So they are drawn outside. Maybe they have some options, but looking at him on the plot, it seems like he's going to be should be on the lead. Kind of has that early gate speed. As far as Parnelli, I don't think the ride was that ideal by Espinoza, where it's kind of like that indecisive, like I'm pushing the pace, but I'm like not
in between. Yeah, it's the in between ride, I call it, because you're not making a decision, right?
Yeah,
like it's just
it's like
make the call, go or sit, one of the two.
Yeah, or just in that type of scenario, it's like just don't fight the horse, just let the horse just do what it's going to do. And I think the fact that there is more natural speed in this race completely, that they don't have to take that trip or they don't have to force into the lead. And, distance wise, I don't think this is ideal for him. So I think that's a hurdle. Overall, I think he's got a lot of hurdles on his side, but I can make a case just as far as trip. And then Newgrange, to me, as you mentioned, it never looked like he was going to win. And he might not have, except for those horses tiring. And I really think it was more of a function of that than Newgrange coming back, but more kind of getting a setup with those other horses coming back to the field. So I'm kind of looking outside that group in here.
Me too. And we can at least give a thought on the others that we haven't mentioned. Sure. Warrant, who was he ran the best race of his career last year in this race, going 1.25 miles. It was the only time he's gone 1.25 miles. He did finish second, going 1.5 miles in the Brooklyn behind Fearless. And he's remarkably consistent. Like, he doesn't run bad races. His speed figures have been a little bit low, but keep in mind his last 2 races, you can say that one of them was the race that sent him to the bench in the Cornhusker. Following that race, he was off for the rest of the year. And then he showed back up on January the 26th in a really soft spot and sort of got what you would want in a first start off the bench, first start of the year, really easy victory to get things going. What about Warrant's chances in here?
Well, Drew got what he wanted that day because that was his 2000th win.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah,
yes.
So that was like
go ahead.
They were they finished all out in a drive. Warrant flipped to the left lead, so he's going to have to improve. He's going to have to step up. Prout was aboard, as you mentioned, back in the Santa Anita handicap way back, and it was kind of a similar pattern. If you're talking pattern, like a second off type. but again, another horse that's really going to have to prove himself, and especially just kind of off that race, he's going to have to step up on this circuit. Yeah. What was the other one? Scarlet Fusion?
Yeah, they're right next to each other, the 9 and the 10. Okay. Scarlet Fusion comes off that turf graded stakes win. He hasn't been in any graded stakes on the dirt yet. So this is sort of acid test time for him. And the same thing for Tiz Quantum, who broke his maiden against maiden claimers. And he stepped up from, a starter allowance into a first level allowance last time. Either of those horses, anything at all, just as we're getting through the rest.
Yeah, it's funny. Like Optics has like the turf conditions, just puts question marks. It's like, I don't even know. Whatever. Yeah. It doesn't even matter. Doesn't even matter. And it looked pretty windy, and Scarlet Fusion looked very well meant that day. The horse was bet down from 8-1 morning line. He was chase covered up off the first flight, just kind of finished like all out in a drive. Sort of a blanket finish, but that horse was sort of much the best that day. So his form prior to that is pretty soft, and the same thing for Tiz Quantum. He did run a big race in his most recent start, as far as like his most improved race to date. That barn can be kind of sneaky and be live at times, but as far as getting that win and speed figure, he did benefit from a softer early pace, and I think that did help him, and he's certainly not going to get a soft early pace, or doesn't look to get a soft early pace in this field.
Emily, thank you so much as we finish up here with the Gold Cup, or with the Big Cap, the Santa Anita Big Cap. That's race number 12 on Saturday. A fantastic betting card at Santa Anita with the 4 graded stakes. If you just watched us talk about these 4 graded stakes, you saw they're big fields, very contentious. You can make a case for many of them. And I always appreciate your work, Emily. Like I said, you're someone who, if I hadn't looked at races, I would blindly go with your analysis. I completely trust you. I know that no matter where it's Hawthorne, Oak Lawn, Santa Anita, you will always put in the same amount of time, the same amount of effort, the same amount of work. And you have a great tool and a great resource with Optics. Tell some of the folks out there again, plug Optics, plug some of the stuff you have coming up this week. Where can we see you? Tell us everything that you want in the next couple minutes.
Yeah. So as far as Optics, obviously there's always the packages on the website, plot, notes, grid, which is kind of like your grid being your standard past performances. The plot gives you that visual representation of the race shape, and then Optics notes and Optics grades, which helps you assess class and form, which is key and takes a lot of the time away from having to watch replays, because that is just, it's time consuming, it's energy consuming. It's people can watch races in different ways and like have a different system, but it just saves you so much time. This Thursday I'll be doing a video with John Doyle. We've been doing weekly videos on Thursday. We recap the Triple Crown preps, or the Dirty preps, and then we talk about the upcoming races. So we've got a big slate of races this weekend to talk through with all the preps. As far as Hawthorne, I do a live show with Jim Miller, which is an hour. It's I guess 1:00 Eastern time. You can catch that on YouTube. We usually cover a few races from Gulfstream Park, Aqueduct, and Tampa, because it's just within that hour, and then discuss one of the preps that weekend. And then with Hawthorne opening up this Sunday, throughout the entire Hawthorne meet, Optics plot and the past 3 run lines, we kind of put it together like what it looks like on the Optics program. For Optics program user, where it has the past 3 running lines with the Optics figure, grades, and notes, is free throughout the whole meet.
Oh, that's awesome.
It really is. I mean, especially with Hawthorne this year, doing that 12% win, play, show, takeout. So if you consider that, plus your past performances, if you're playing those and that's all you have is Optics plot and those past 3 run lines, I think you're going to do pretty well with just those things. So, your barrier to entry can be pretty cheap from that end.
And you can get a great way of hearing you, like how you use it for yourself, right? When you talk about the races yourself, if you're watching and following along and you want to look at those past performances, you can see how Emily uses the information, like for yourself, positives, negatives, how you talk about the grid and all sorts of different, whether it be racing comments or the circles and squares, everything. I like hearing how you use the information. And so that would be something that's great for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, having like good information, like I don't know if I should say this because maybe I'll have like a bad day and this will like backfire. But doing this prep for these 4 races, I think I spent 10 minutes for
Yeah.
all the races that the 4 races we just talked about.
And
Prep work.
it's,
Now there's a lot of trip notes that went in, so there's like months of work and
yeah, so
years of
you're
work.
doing the prep a lot of the time, putting those notes in, and
Yeah,
these
yeah,
horses
but
and
as far
stuff.
as like
But
now that the data is available and I just have to like look at it and assess it, it's like things just kind of like pop, right? And now
yeah,
and then it comes into play to where it's like, okay, now I'm just assessing the board and how other people are reacting to maybe information that they have, or ways that they're seeing, and then looking for opportunities. So having that information, it does help you, especially if you're playing, because it can allow you to kind of stay flexible in order to kind of make those adjustments on the fly. Oh, they're overbetting,
the
Proxy. I thought he'd be at least 5-1, and they're betting him down to 6-5. Well, that's unplayable. Well, if he's being overbet, who's being overlooked? And you can have that information to kind of help you make those adjustments.
yeah, there's no immediate get rich quick scheme formula, anything like that. But when you can have tools that can help you get the information, because once you have the information, like we're saying, everybody will do different things with it, right? There's never going to be anything that's like, here, this is an automatic winner, but this is going to save your process so much time, or the days that you maybe haven't had the time to go, like on a big card. A lot of people probably like to do their own work or like to do a lot of it and find this stuff out, but maybe days throughout the week or one particular race, or just like you said, when the race changes and all of a sudden the betting board is different than you expected, now I have to call an audible. Now I can look at the plot. Now I can look at optics and see, you know what? This horse is not far off of what it would take to win, and the price is double what it should. Boom. That's my play.
Right, and especially with the track like Hawthorne, like out in Southern California, the big circuits, you have a lot of people that are watching races, and your public handicappers that kind of follow those circuits.
We're all seeing the same stuff for the most part, pretty
Yeah,
close to it.
and yeah, the information is out there. There's buzz on certain horses or whatever, but I'm Hawthorne drew today for opening day, and right before we went on, I was doing, making sure I have all the notes in for that, and I'm watching replays from Mahoning and, tracks that like I don't follow to get that. And it's like, that information is probably not, there's not many people that are doing that.
No.
And there's a big advantage that I had going into this, because all the Hawthorne stuff is already done. All the Fairground stuff is already done. All the Oaklawn stuff. So all those horses, all those notes, like throughout the last probably 6 months, are already in there. So having 6 months of information on horses, especially horses that are, non-winners of two, it's like when they're going to run a good race, like you got to know when it's their day, right?
When it's coming. And this is something that I found out honestly over the last 5 years. My best days and my biggest scores came at Sam Houston and at Louisiana, for the same reason that you're talking about, is that when you're people that play and that sort of handicap the way that we do too, what you're looking for, we're not looking to play the chalk horses. We're a little bit more trip oriented. We're looking for those bigger bust out long shots. Less people are putting in the work at tracks like that, right? It just makes sense. There are less people betting it, so there are less people putting in that level of analysis, and you're going to get a great starting point if you're using optics at a place like Hawthorne. Like, you're already so far ahead of the curve right off the bat when you just begin.
And it's free. Like, it's free.
Yeah. It's totally free.
I don't even have to sell you on it. Just like click the link, like that's it. You're done.
Folks, you need to find friends where you can kick back and talk about races like this with Emily. I never even tell you how long we're going to take, and you never even tell me like, no, I can't do it for this. I got to be done by like, we just talk and we go, and sometimes it's a little shorter or sometimes it's longer, but for every race, it's always different because every race is different. We kind of talk it out, and you never should go into it with a template saying it's going to be this way. All of the fans and all the listeners of That's What G Said, they always love when you come on, Emily. I always get great feedback, and they always ask again, when's Emily coming back? I said, I have to do the dance to where I'm asking often enough, but not so often that I'm annoying her. So it's like,
well,
I want
to, you know what I always say in life is that you should always ask, because
right.
the worst that somebody's going to tell you is
no,
right?
Right.
And then you're in the same spot. So really don't hesitate to ask. And I absolutely appreciate that people listen and that they enjoy the content. That means the world to me. It really does. I really appreciate it, because putting out content it's hard work, and so I'm glad that people find value and enjoyment from it.
Yep, we've had a lot of hours now through the years, and that you've helped me out, and I'm so happy that we've become friends. And again, we talk about it. We still haven't even had a day where we sat down and played some races together at a track, which has to happen one of these days coming up, where we can meet in person and kick back and have a nice time. So, this is a great week coming up. Lots of big races. Good luck at Hawthorne. Good luck at Santa Anita, Gulfstream, Aqueduct, Oaklawn, all the tracks that you're playing, Emily. We're going to be following along with optics and all the great work you do. And again, just thank you so much for your time through the years. It's been a blast, and I know you always put in the hard work, and we really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much, and good luck, everybody, this weekend.
Make sure to give Emily a follow. You'll hear her back here again real soon on That's What G Said podcast. Don't go anywhere, folks. We still have a lot more to discuss.